Is this the dagger?
Welcome to another episode of the On the Ball Show here on the Right Way Sports Network YouTube channel. I'm your host, Pranav, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Lacertosa and Christian DeBlock. Guys, how are you doing today?
Good. I'm super excited. We got a really good game a couple nights ago between the Warriors and the Lakers. Expecting, a good one tonight. And then obviously we'll discuss the first round tonight, and super excited for that because it's great to have NBA playoff basketball back.
Yeah, this is our first real play-in tournament, so it's been really exciting. Last year we had Portland versus Memphis, but this is an actual tournament, so it's been really cool to see. Even though some games have been blowouts, we saw Lakers versus Warriors and Spurs versus Grizzlies, which were two great games. We have Warriors versus Grizzlies tonight, so I can't wait. And then the playoffs for the next 2 months, so I can't wait.
And with that being said, guys, make sure to go subscribe to our YouTube channel and download our mobile app. That way, you have access to all of our content as soon as it's released. But with that being said, guys, the playoffs start tomorrow at noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern. The playoffs start, Bucks and Heat. No more Mickey Mouse playoffs. No, I'm just kidding. But the playoffs do start tomorrow. But before we get into that, the Warriors and the Lakers played arguably the game of the year the other night. So I wanted to know, what are your main takeaways from that game? And do you have any concerns with the Lakers moving forward based on how bad they looked in that opener for their play-in tournament? Justin, I'll start with you.
So my takeaways from this game, I had the Warriors winning coming into it because I thought the Lakers would just underestimate them, and the Warriors, their defense would be really good on Anthony Davis, which we did see. And I thought Stephen Curry was going to be maybe not like 10 3-pointers a game, Steph Curry, but I thought he was going to be amazing. And he had 37 points very efficiently against the best defense in the NBA. So the Warriors, they came out to play. They came out guns blazing from the start. And my main takeaways are, the Lakers, I don't want to say they're in trouble because I still think they're going to go very far in the playoffs. But I think they're in more trouble than last year because obviously last year, their playoff road wasn't as hard as it's going to be this year because this year they're the 17th. They're going to have to go up against the Phoenix Suns, who had the second-best record league-wide, then one of Denver or Portland, and then they're going to have to go up against Utah or Los Angeles, the Clippers most likely. So I think with the Lakers, I think they might be in some trouble because, LeBron could tweak his ankle again. Anthony Davis could go down. Some role players could go down. So they could be in trouble, but I think they're going to ease back into it a little bit. They do have a lot of problems. Andre Drummond is just really bad, and he proved that again. And against the Suns with that pick and roll, it's going to be really hard to guard because Andre Drummond is just not a good pick and roll defender. But I think the Lakers, they could be in some trouble down the line. They could easily lose before the finals to the Clippers or the Jazz or the Suns. They could lose to one of those teams. With the Warriors, I think this makes it clear that although they aren't the finals contender that they were for the past half a decade, they could still win a round, even as the 8th seed. And I would take Utah over the Warriors. But at the same time, the Warriors, they're clicking when it matters. This is the best basketball they played all year on both ends of the floor. Draymond Green is easily one of the best defenders we've ever seen. He proved that against the Lakers, against Anthony Davis. And Stephen Curry is just the best offensive player we've ever seen by a pretty wide margin. And I think that'll carry over into the playoffs very well. And Andrew Wiggins has played great. Juan Toscano-Anderson. And Jordan Poole as well. He's been amazing. So I think the Warriors, I wouldn't predict them to win a round, but they're firing on all cylinders right now, and they could easily go the distance in the playoffs. I don't think they would make the finals because that's a bit too much for the Warriors as an 8 seed, especially looking at their talent outside of Curry. But they could go far.
Yeah, I think the one thing that stuck out to me that you mentioned, Justin, is Andre Drummond. And I think, late in that game against the Warriors, we didn't see him on the floor. It was Anthony Davis at the 5. And I think, against the Suns, we'll see a lot of that where he's going to be the 5 against DeAndre Ayton. I assume that's what they will do. Just based off, Drummond isn't the best defender. He's not going to be able to really do too much against DeAndre Ayton. So I would assume, he'll start the gameplay, 20 minutes ish. And then, you'll see a closing lineup that includes Anthony Davis at the 5. But yeah, I think I am a little concerned about the Lakers. They were really not that good against the Warriors, and the Warriors were firing all cylinders. It was a fantastic game to watch as a neutral. But I think the West is deep, and it's deep enough to the point where I'm not so sure they are. They'll probably beat the Suns. I think it's going to be a 7-game series. Probably they could. I think they would edge them in a 7-game series. But they're going to be banged up. It's going to be a physical series, and I just don't see them, getting back to the finals again. I think it's going to be a lot more difficult in a loaded West. So yeah, I think the Lakers, there is some concern. I think we do need to see, a fully healthy LeBron in order to, take this team to the level they want to be at. But yeah, it's a concern. But I mean, it was a great game to watch overall. And then in terms of the Warriors, yeah, I don't know if I'd go as far as them, beating the Jazz. I think they could send it 6 games, something like that. I just think, a lot will, rest on Donovan Mitchell's ankle. Obviously, he just came back to practice for the first time in a long, I think mid-April or something like that. So he's been out for a far amount of time. So I think, that will be interesting to see. But I think the Jazz are well-rounded. They're, a team that is very dangerous, especially against the Warriors. But the Warriors were very good against Lakers. Credit to them. They were firing on pretty much all cylinders. I mean, everybody you mentioned, Justin. I mean, Juan Toscano Anderson was hitting threes. Jordan Poole, attacks LeBron, and we haven't seen much of that. He's been great. He was averaging like 20 points in the last couple games of the regular season. And Draymond Green defensively. I mean, you can go down the line. The Warriors, play that game pretty well. Even Andrew Wiggins was great as a secondary guy. So it's interesting to see. We obviously would like to see them, personally, I would like to see them beat the Grizzlies tonight, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, no, I think in terms of Lakers, I think, they should probably beat the Suns. But I'm not so sure they can make a deep run again like last season. And then for the Warriors, it'll be fun to watch them against the Jazz, but I would say they would probably lose in 6 games.
My bad. But in terms of the Lakers, I'm not as concerned as other people are on social media. It is a 1-game sample size. And in a 7-game series, it's way easier to game plan and adjust to different strategies. But my biggest concern with the Lakers is Andre Drummond and Frank Vogel's hesitancy to take him out. I mean, I have the stat pulled up. With Andre Drummond on the floor for 16 minutes and 45 seconds in the play-in game, Anthony Davis scored 0 points on 0 for 7 shooting. And when Andre Drummond wasn't in the game, he scored 25 points on 10 of 17 shooting. That indicates that Andre Drummond clearly does not help with spacing. He's an incapable passer. He's inefficient. He clogs up the paint. And when you have a generational talent like Anthony Davis, he needs all the spacing in the world to operate. And a guy like Marc Gasol, who you brought in the offseason, who's a good defender, and he can shoot the ball, and he can pass very well. I could just keep on going. Marc Gasol is a perfect fit next to Anthony Davis. I know Anthony Davis at the 5 is ideally what you want, but that's not what really he wants, even though I think he should want that. It's the best chance for the Lakers to succeed when he plays at the 5. But when you don't play him at the 5, you have to play Marc Gasol more minutes. I don't think Marc Gasol played very much, if at all, in the play-in game. So that has to change. I expect Frank Vogel to make that adjustment as he sees more and more of Drummond and sees that he's not the answer. But time will tell. Time will tell in terms of that. And in terms of the Warriors, I do have them beating the Grizzlies tonight. But in terms of how either the Warriors or the Grizzlies can match up with the Utah Jazz, I think if the Warriors push them to the brink, they can win the series. However, I don't see that happening. I have Utah winning in 6, and we'll get to that later. But in terms of that series, in terms of the play-in game tonight, I have the Warriors winning. If they get off to the start they did last night, the last 2 nights ago against the Lakers, if they get off to such a hot start, shooting the ball, play with that same defensive intensity, I don't think it'll be a close game at all, because the Grizzlies just don't match the Lakers in terms of defensive intensity and offensive firepower. But that's just me. you guys have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I allude to a lot of what you said about the Grizzlies. I think they let the Spurs back into that game, and to be quite honest with you, the Spurs are just not that good of a team, especially at this moment in time. So yeah, I think Memphis will have to play really well. You're gonna have to see Dylan Brooks, who was really important for them in that game against the Warriors a couple nights ago, or on the final day of the regular season, excuse me. You're gonna have to see him have a big impact. Probably defensively, will match up against Curry. They're gonna have to do a good job on Curry. As simple as that. And I think, yeah, you mentioned the intensity of the Lakers defense is probably nowhere near the same level as the Grizzlies. It's just probably that much higher. So I think, yeah, it's the same thing. You're gonna have to see a big game from John Morant and Jonas Valanciunas, who had 20 and 20 against the Spurs. But I just don't see that happening. I completely agree. I think the Warriors will get it done tonight, and match up with the Jazz in the first round.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. With this matchup tonight, I think the Warriors will win this. I don't think it'll be convincingly like we've seen with a lot of other playing games, especially last night and on Tuesday with Pacers versus Hornets and Wizards versus Pacers. But I think the Warriors, throughout the game, maybe it'll be a close first half, but I think towards the second half, the Warriors, their experience will kick in, and Stephen Curry, Draymond Green, they're going to clutch up on both ends of the floor, Curry on offense, Draymond on defense. And I think their experience is just going to lead them to the victory tonight. And with the Grizzlies, I could see them winning. I think it's a low probability, but I could see them winning this game because they have some of the best chemistry in the league. Taylor Jenkins is the most underrated coach in the league, in my opinion. And that synergy with this lineup, all the lineups they put on the floor, it's just so incredible to watch. So I'm going to go roll with the Warriors, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Grizzlies won. But I'll go with the Warriors by like 10, 15 points.
Right, and we're going to keep it rolling here. We discussed both the play-in tournament, and that concludes tonight if depending on the winner of the Golden State Warriors Memphis Grizzlies matchup. So we're going to start off in the Eastern Conference. This episode was to break down each matchup in the first round. So let's start off with the 1 seed versus the 8 seed. Justin's Wizards going up against the Philadelphia 76ers. Justin, what percentage chance do you give the Washington Wizards to win the series? What keys do you have for them to win the series? Do they even have a chance to win the series? And how many games do you see the winner winning the series?
The probability of us winning is low. I'm very happy that we made the playoffs after 3 years of missing it, but we have a low probability of winning this round. I think the Philadelphia 76ers in rounds prior in the second and third round, they're frauds completely, but we don't match up with them well at all. Honestly, we would have lost to both Brooklyn and Philly, but I would have rather played Brooklyn because, that's just an extra fire lit under everyone on the team, especially Russell Westbrook. And that defense obviously isn't nearly what Philly's is. I don't think Philly's offense will translate well to the playoffs at all with Ben Simmons, Matisse Thybulle, Dwight Howard, all those guys going to be on the court at multiple times. And I think Danny Green will have another rough playoff series. But, the Sixers defense is just it's so hard to get by because on the perimeter you have Ben Simmons and Matisse Thybulle, 2 of the 3 to 5 best perimeter defenders in the entire NBA. And then if you get past them, which is a low percentage, you have Joel Embiid, one of the best rim protectors in the game, sitting at their rim waiting for you. So that defense is just so good. And also guys like Danny Green will be on the court as well, who's been great defensively this year. So I really don't think we're going to win the series. Some of the keys, I would say, are Russell Westbrook playing how he played post All-Star break. Against Boston, he had a very rough game, but it's not like that was just an off game. It was just a completely different style of play from him. Post All-Star break, he was getting into the lane with ease. He was dropping off teardrop passes to pretty much anyone that was on the block. He was kicking it out to shooters that were open. He was drawing gravity, but against the Celtics, he was just chucking up shots. And against the Pacers, he went back to his post-All-Star break self. I don't know if that was because it was a winner-go-home game or that's because, he realizes, this is what we got to do to win. I have to be like this. So I think if Westbrook could be like that, we have a better chance of winning, but we're not going to win the series. I would give us probably a game. Maybe we could go to 6 games with the Sixers, but I don't see it going to 7. I don't see us winning. So for this series, as happy as I am that we're back in the playoffs, I'm going to go with the Sixers in 5.
Yeah, I completely agree with Justin. I mean, it would be nice. I mean, obviously, as a Wizards fan, you'd like to see your team push them. But yeah, I think this series goes 5. I would give it a less than a 5% chance of the Wizards winning it. Yeah, it's tough because they're dealing with some injuries. I mean, Thomas Bryant would be a nice, fun matchup to watch against Joel Embiid. But obviously, we won't see him. But yeah, I think the key obviously is going to be the play of Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal. I think it's hard to see a situation where Bradley Beal is going to be efficient offensively, but if he's efficient in a couple games, I mean, they may be able to push them because he's just that good of a scorer when he's on. And obviously, you mentioned Russell Westbrook. The second half of the season's been lights out. I mean, he's done so much for this team. But yeah, I mean, they had trouble shutting down Jason Tatum, and I know Jason Tatum's he's a very different player compared to what the Sixers have in terms of their offense, but along the same lines, you're going to see, Joel Embiid probably have a really dominant series. It's hard to see a situation where guys like Alex Len, Daniel Gafford can really, contain him. But yeah, I think it'll really come down to how they are offensively because, I mean, if Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal can't get into a groove and they shoot, under 40% from the field, it's hard to see a situation where they can, win more than a game. But yeah, you mentioned, Justin, I mean, this team, the Sixers, will probably win the first round. But, after that, we don't really know. I mean, we mentioned last week, it would be nice to see, whether it's the Hawks, the Sixers, or excuse me, the Knicks, or all these other teams that, could potentially, match up with the Sixers in the second round. Those are interesting matchups because, the Sixers aren't, one of the better teams we've seen over the last couple of seasons in the postseason. So, yeah, I think the Sixers will get through in 5. But in terms of the next round, I'm not too sure. But yeah, I think the Sixers will hand the Wizards in 5 games.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see the series going that far. I have the Sixers winning in 5 games as well. I mean, when you take a look at the matchup, the Sixers, offensively, the Wizards are really good, but you take a look at their defense, and it's just an entirely other story. And I know Daniel Gafford was amazing against the Indiana Pacers, but Joel Embiid was absolutely dominant when he was matched up against Daniel Gafford earlier this season. And I think when you take into account Philly's offense with Joel Embiid, how Washington really has no answer for him inside, and then combined with their intoxicating defense, I just don't see the series going very far. Out of respect for Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal, I'll give them a game. They'll get hot one game, and that'll be enough firepower to lift them to at least one win, maybe. But I think that's the most they can win in this series. Maybe 2 if I'm being generous. Most likely outcome is that the Wizards are going to lose in 4 and 5. They just don't match up really well, and the Sixers are simply a better team.
One more thing I want to add also that really hurts our chances is Bradley Beal's health. He's clearly been a little bit shaken up these past few games in the play-in tournament since he got injured against Indiana, and then he re-aggravated it a little bit in Charlotte. And, I mean, it's just been pretty hard to watch. Against Boston, he was pretty streaky against Boston. He would have some stretches where he would hit 3 shots in a row, but then he would miss 5 shots in a row the next 5 minutes. But against Indiana, he was doing amazing. But at the same time, that's Indiana. Without Miles Turner, that's one of the worst defenses in the league. We're going to have Philly's going to have Matisse Thybulle or Ben Simmons on him at all times, most likely. So, as Christian said, I think Beal's going to have an inefficient series, and that's another thing. It's just with his health, it's much harder to see us going any farther than we would have went with Beal's hamstring injury.
Right, and let's keep this going. We're going to get to the 2-7 matchup, which is the Nets and the Celtics. Let's be honest. Do we see the Celtics winning the series, much less a game?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to see a situation where Jason Tatum's going to, put up enough points. He'd probably have to put up, 40 or 50, honestly, to really push this team. I mean, we haven't seen a lot of Harden and Kyrie and KD all together. I think it was maybe 8 or 9 games throughout the regular season. But yeah, I mean, this is a series that I see going 4. I just don't see a situation where even if Jason Tatum has one of his games where he goes off for 50, I mean, it's just that incredible how offensively gifted this team is, the Brooklyn Nets. They're probably going to the NBA Finals as of right now, unless something changes. I just don't see a scenario where Jason Tatum does enough and Kemba Walker and, the likes of those guys do enough to even win a game. So I think this is pretty simple. I think the Nets are going to sweep them in 4.
And just before Justin goes in, that was exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say, even if Jason Tatum goes for 40, 50, hell, even 60, I still see the Nets winning a possible game. Like, it's very likely that the Nets would still wind up winning the game because they are that good offensively.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could easily be a sweep. I'm going to go with Nets in 5. There's no way this goes 6 games, in my opinion. But I think there will be one game where Tatum just goes off for 40 or 50. Kemba Walker just goes up for 25, 30. Marcus Smart, his defense is insane, and then he's hitting all of the shots. So I think there will be one game where the Celtics as a whole unit just get hot. But there's no chance they win more than one game. I mean, the probability is extremely low. So I'm going to go Nets in 5.
Yeah, I mean, I think we pretty much consensusly agree that Boston stands no chance. Let's just be real with that. One of the more intriguing matchups of the first round is the 3-6 matchup in the Eastern Conference, which is the Miami Heat. I mean, the Milwaukee Bucks are the 3 seed and the Miami Heat are the 6 seed. Do you guys see the Milwaukee Bucks getting over the hump this time? They did play the Miami Heat last year in the playoffs. They lost in 5. But with adding Drew Holiday, replacing Eric Bledsoe, having a newer style offense where Giannis is more effective off the ball, do you guys see any change? Do you see them winning this series?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think, this Heat team, compared to last season, which I think a lot of people consider that Heat run to be, a little skewed just because of the bubble and every other factor not being there. I think it will honestly go 6 or 7 games. It could really go either way. I think, we saw in the bubble, I mean, Giannis was not healthy. We saw him, I think, get taken out of one game, and Chris Middleton had to, basically play lights out in order for them to, get over the hump in that specific elimination game. But yeah, I think, the Bucks are a little bit more suited this time around, because of Drew Holiday and a lot of other guys, playing at a high level. Once again, I think the question is, can Giannis figure it out against the likes of Bam Adebayo and Andre Iguodala and the Jimmy Butlers of the world, who are all going to be matched up against him and giving him a lot of trouble. So I think, as of right now, I would think, the Heat really match up well against them again. Right now, I would probably have them winning in 7 games, but certainly see a Bucks team that's a little bit more different from last season, and can probably go and suit them well to match up a little bit better. But as of right now, I think the Heat are the better team in this matchup and will win in 7.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the Bucks in 7 games. I think this could go 6 or 7 games for either team, but I'm gonna go with the Bucks because I just think they simply have more talent. It's gonna be much harder to formulate a wall against them, and I'm not gonna really bring up the Jay Crowder thing because Trevor Ariza, I think he's gonna fill his shoes wonderfully, but at the same time, the Bucks, I mean, Drew Holiday is such a massive upgrade over Eric Bledsoe on both ends of the court. And Holiday is known to step up in the playoffs when it matters. Eric Bledsoe is not. So I'm going to go with the Bucks because, I mean, outside of Holiday, too, they did add more talent. Bryn Forbes has been lights out as a shooter. Bobby Portis, PJ Tucker. So I'm going to go with the Milwaukee Bucks in the series. I think it is still very close. I mean, either of these teams could potentially make a finals run or lose this round. It just depends on this matchup. But I'm going to go with the Bucks. And also, from watching interviews and paying close attention in the games, evaluating Giannis more this season, he has a different approach. He sort of lets the game come to him. That's his own words. And then when you look at that, I mean, he really is. And I think that's going to fit much better in the playoffs. So I think that'll help against the wall as well. So I'm going to go Bucks in 7.
Yeah, I mean, I have the Bucks winning in about 6 games, I would say. Their offense is much better suited. I alluded to it in the intro. I mean, Giannis is different. I mean, his off-ball has improved tremendously. He's cutting much effectively. I mean, his shooting has also improved from the perimeter. His free throw shooting has also been more impressive as of recently. And then you mentioned it, the addition of Drew Holiday and replacing Eric Bledsoe, who is damn near unplayable come playoff time. I mean, just break after break after break. You have a guy in Drew Holiday now who can guard guards at an elite level. We've seen him shut down guys like Damian Lillard in the highest moments in the playoffs. And then you take a look at their spacing and their shooting. They're shooting much better this year compared to last, heading into the playoffs. And I think with the addition of Drew Holiday, combined with better shooting, combined with Giannis's improvements, making better ancillary passes, improving his playmaking all around, and improving his free throw shooting, I think with this roster, they'll win against the Miami Heat. And then moving forward, they'll play the Brooklyn Nets in the second round, is my opinion, as they would probably beat the Celtics, most likely, I would hope. But they would beat the Celtics, and then the Miami Heat would lose to the Milwaukee Bucks in about 6 games. I think in Miami, that's a tough atmosphere to play, and that's where Miami would capitalize and tie the series at 2-2. But coming back to Milwaukee, I think Milwaukee's just going to have too much this year. And Miami's also regressed in a sense in terms of their shooting has been off this year, but I don't expect them to be terrible shooting the ball in the series. I mean, they still have elite shooters. They have Duncan Robinson. Tyler Hero has been much better as of recently. Hopefully he can keep that up for their sake. But I see this being a good series, a solid 6-game series, but I'll take the Bucks. And then the final matchup. The final matchup of the first round is Christian's Knicks versus the 5-seed Hawks. Game 1 is Sunday in Madison Square Garden. I believe ticket prices are through the roof. I did some research, and it costs more to attend a game in Madison Square Garden than it is to travel to Atlanta, buy a hotel room, and watch a game there. So it's crazy. But Christian, I'm going to let you start off this one. Who do you see winning the series, and how many games? Give us your take.
Yeah, so, I think the Knicks, or honestly, without any bias, are really, match up well with this team, but so do the Hawks. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see, how the Knicks, defend Trae Young. I think that's going to be the key because in the last matchup, late in the season, Trae Young was lights out. I think he had almost 30 points in 3 quarters.
And then he
then got hurt.
Yeah,
he hurt his ankle, and then the Knicks, cruised. Well, it didn't cruise, but they, were comfortably winning in that game. I think Julius Randle had over 40 points. But yeah, I think the biggest question I have with the Knicks is how often is Elfrid Payton going to be on the floor? I think everybody is talking about, his regression over the last, 20 games of the season. He was only really playing less than 20 minutes per game. They were closing typically with Derrick Rose. Even Emmanuel quickly was getting, more crunch time minutes than Elfrid Payton. And there's even, talks of Frank Ntilikina potentially, taking those minutes away from Elfrid Payton, which I'm not certainly opposed to just because, he's a really long defender, could really frustrate Trae Young potentially. But in terms of the Hawks, I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see how Trae Young, performs in his first postseason. You have so many different weapons offensively. I mean, Bogdan Bogdanovic has been great in the second half of the season after returning from his injury. I mean, John Collins, he's great as well. And then you obviously have Clint Capela, who's, done a lot of great things for this team as well. But I think, the question is a guy like DeAndre Hunter, what's his impact going to be? Because, you can take a lot of different guys and throw a lot at Julius Randle. I think that's going to be the key because, if he's contained, the Knicks are, suited to, maybe still win if he's not at his best. But certainly if they can, frustrate Julius Randle to a point where he's very inefficient, maybe some turnovers and some foul trouble would certainly, hinder their chances of the winning. But, as of right now, I think everybody's playing well for the Knicks at the moment. You have guys like Derrick Rose, RJ Barrett playing at a really high level. And they have a lot of good role players. I mean, Reggie Bullock's been great this season. Alec Burks has, provided a lot of offense off the bench. I think that it's going to go 7 games. But I think, Game 7 at MSG, sold out. The fans are going to be there. I think that will be, the deciding factor in a tight, 2 or 3 possession game in Game 7. And the Knicks will advance to the second round.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm going to go with the Knicks. I'm going to go with the Knicks in 6, though. I just think with the Hawks, I mean, the Knicks, they haven't been in the playoffs for nearly a decade. And I just think with this intensity and tenacity that the Knicks have and bring on a nightly basis, I think that's going to fit into the playoffs like a glove. And Trae Young at the same time, he's not a great fit in the playoffs right now. This is his first playoff series. He's going against one of the best and toughest defenses in the entire league. And he's 6'1". He's a small guard. So I think that the Knicks will pressure him a lot. And I think that's going to really be the deciding factor in the series, the Knicks, how they guard Trae Young. Because if they just let Trae Young be the regular Trae Young that's a top 10 offensive player in the league, they will probably lose the series. But I think the Knicks will pretty much shut him down. And I could see a world where Derrick Rose outplays him in the series. Obviously, Trae Young's a better player, and he still will be after the playoffs. But I can see a world where Derrick Rose just outplays Trae Young in this playoff series. He's been an elite closer for the Knicks, and since adding Derrick Rose, the Knicks have had one of the best clutch time offenses in the entire league, and I think that's going to help a lot. I think there will be 2 games where Trae Young is Trae Young, and John Collins and Clint Capela, they do their jobs, and the rest of the supporting cast as well, like DeAndre Hunter, Bogdan Bogdanovic. But I think the Knicks, I think they'll win in 6 games rather than 7, and I think it'll be a very close series. But just that defense and intensity, I don't think that bodes well for the Atlanta Hawks. So I'm going Knicks in 6.
I'm going to go with Hawks in 7. I mean, that was my pick prior when I saw the standings play out how it would. It's probably the hardest series in the entire playoffs, East and West, to pick. I mean, both of these teams are so even. When you talk about the Knicks being so great defensively, but just about average to below average offensively, and then you take the Hawks, they're great offensively, but then you see that they're just average to below average on the defensive end. So it's a very interesting and very hard series to predict. But the reason I'm going to go with the Hawks is because I believe over the course of the series, Trae Young is going to have a couple bad games. He will. And that's going to be the games the Knicks win. But I think over the course of the series, you'll get better acclimated to the situation. And I also think the Hawks supporting cast is really underrated. I mean, you have guys like DeAndre Hunter, who can hit the 3-ball really well, and he could also defend at a high rate. Cam Reddish is set to come back. Cam Reddish has been extremely inconsistent throughout his career in terms of offensive production, but defensively, he's amazing. And then you have Clint Capela, who I believe is a top 5 candidate for Defensive Player of the Year this year. He's been absolutely lights out with his rim protection, basically carrying the Atlanta Hawks defense and making them, like when he's on the court, they're one of the better defenses in the league. But then when he's not, they're below average. So, I mean, you have guys like that. Clint Capela is also an excellent lob threat inside for Trae Young. And we all know what Trae Young's playmaking capabilities are. I think his scoring efficiency is going to see a big drop in the series. He's going to shoot below average, but I think his playmaking is really going to help carry him into having somewhat of a competent series. And then with all that being said, this is such a tough series to predict because you have the Knicks, on the other hand, who have the perfect game plan against Trae Young. They have a great perimeter defense. They have a great interior defense as well. I mean, it's really pick your poison. I'm just going to go with the Hawks. I like Trae. I'm going to go with the Hawks. But with that being said, with the Eastern Conference concluding, let's move on to the West. So Utah versus Golden State or Memphis. Let's go with scenario 1, which is Golden State, since off air we all talked about how we all think Golden State is going to win this game tonight. With that being said, let's talk about scenario 1 in which they play Golden State. Justin, how many games do you see this going if they play the Golden State Warriors? And do you think Steph Curry can pull off an upset and take the Warriors past the Utah Jazz?
I'm going to go with the Jazz in 6. I mean, Steph Curry, he's arguably the best player in basketball. If not, he's second, and he's no farther below that. He's easily the best offensive player in the league right now and of all time, as I said before. Draymond Green, his defense is just so good. Andrew Wiggins is a much improved defender, and I think his offense I think he'll be inconsistent in the playoffs offensively. But with the Jazz, I just think even though they're the 1 seed and have the best record league-wide, I still think they're the most underrated team going into the postseason because they may not have the Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James, Steph Curry as superstar, but their supporting cast around Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, which pretty much complements each other perfectly because Mitchell is the scoring engine, Gobert is the defensive anchor. I mean, it's pretty much perfect. And Quinn Snyder is an underrated underrated candidate for Coach of the Year, in my opinion, because the way he's just adjusted this season, it's been incredible to see. I mean, they have the best team defense in the league, in my opinion. And Steph Curry, you can't stop Steph Curry no matter who you could put on him. And the Jazz, they don't have anyone to put on him. But I don't think Steph Curry is going to just level up his game against the Utah Jazz because their defense is just that good. And they're probably going to have Royce O'Neal guarding him, but, I mean, pretty much anyone can switch onto him other than really Rudy Gobert. And I think since Quinn Snyder has adjusted so well, he's adjusted so much since the last regular season, and this is a completely different team when you watch them play from this year to last year. I think he's going to do the same thing this postseason. I think he's going to adjust. So he kind of neutralizes that Gobert thing where, he can't switch on to guys like Curry or Kyrie. So I think he's going to try and adjust with that and neutralize it so the Jazz have a better chance. So if the Warriors take it to 7 games, which is possible, I might go with the Warriors because it's really hard to stop Steph Curry in in the 7th game, and Donovan Mitchell too. But Steph Curry is easily the best player on the floor in this series. So if it goes 7, I might go with Golden State, but I don't think it will. I think the Jazz are just too good, and they're the 1 seed for a reason. So I'll go Jazz in 6.
Yeah, I agree. I think the most I see it going is 6 games, and it could even go 5. I think the one thing that could, slow down the Jazz, especially early in the series, is going to be Donovan Mitchell's health. He hasn't played in a while, so he's going to have to, adjust and get back into the flow of things. But I think the big difference, but compared to the Jazz of last season and this season, is they're going to have Bogdanovich for the postseason, which is really big because he was averaging 20 points a game last season. He was really missed in that series against Denver, and they went to 7 games and were a shot away. Mike Conley, buzzer beater from, sending it to OT, I believe, in Game 7. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a fun series. I think that's going to be the best thing of it. I think Steph Curry, is going to get his points. He's going to score 35 points a game. It's going to be great to watch him again back in the postseason. And, if guys like Andrew Wiggins and Draymond Green, and they're all effective like we saw against the Lakers, this could be a little bit of a different story. I don't see them pulling off the upset just because, the Jazz are just that well run. They have so many different guys that can get buckets at any given time. Obviously, Rudy Gobert is Rudy Gobert, and he's going to be a force in the paint. But yeah, I think Donovan Mitchell's health will be the biggest concern in games 1, 2, and maybe 3. But I think they can still take care of it, and I think probably would go 5, but certainly could go 6. But I think no more than 6, and the Jazz will once again advance to the second round.
Yeah, so in the scenario that the Jazz play the Golden State Warriors, I'm along the same lines as Justin. I think it's going to be Jazz in 6. I mean, the Warriors pose more matchup problems for the Jazz just because they're so perimeter oriented with Steph Curry, obviously. So I think in that situation, the Jazz would win in 6. But however, if the Jazz play the Memphis Grizzlies, I see a sweep. The Memphis Grizzlies' entire game plan is to attack the paint, and the Jazz have the best rim protector in basketball. And as much as I would love to see Golden State versus Utah for the entertainment aspect, obviously, and I would love to see that matchup. But in the scenario that Memphis wins tonight and they play the Utah Jazz, Rudy Gobert is going to have one of the best defensive playoff series in NBA history. And it's really going to change the narratives about him just because of how paint oriented the Memphis Grizzlies are. It's going to be so easy to game plan for them with Rudy Gobert leading the charge in the paint. So that's why if it's Memphis, it's going to be a sweep. But if it's Golden State, I would give the Jazz the win in 6 games. But with that being said, let's go to the 2-7 matchup, which is obviously the Phoenix Suns versus Los Angeles Lakers. What are you guys feeling? Are the Lakers going to lose in the first round? No. But does anyone here have the Lakers losing this series? And if they do, please present your case.
No, I don't see it happening. I think even though, we saw team that was playing, pretty badly in the first half against the Golden State Warriors, I think they'll get it done. I think, credit to the Suns for getting the 2nd seed. It's probably the worst matchup possible. They were hoping probably for something much different, or even getting that 1 seed, which would have, had them against the Warriors, who I think would suit them more to get through the first round. But yeah, I think, Anthony Davis is, going to play at his high level. We're going to see LeBron still, put up his numbers, even with the, a bad ankle. I think it'll, probably go 6. The Suns could certainly send it to 7. If Devin Booker and Chris Paul are playing at a high level, we obviously, we mentioned Andre Drummond, and maybe if, Frank Vogel doesn't make the right adjustments and DeAndre Ayton, punishes them for that, it could go to 7. But yeah, I think, the Lakers are going to do what they do, and they're going to, find a way to get through this. So yeah, I have, the Lakers winning in 6.
Yeah, I agree. I have Lakers in 6 as well. I think there will be a few games where down the stretch, Chris Paul and Devin Booker just completely just go off. And I think the Suns will definitely win one of the first 2 games. But, I mean, other than that, I think the Suns will just get one more game outside of that. I think the Suns will expose the pick and roll defense when Andre Drummond is on the court. And I think there will be a game where Anthony Davis does look a little bit rusty against DeAndre Ayton because Ayton's been a very underrated defender this year. He had an amazing defensive performance on Giannis about a month or two ago. And I think there will be a game where he's not shut down AD, but there's a game where he doesn't look like himself. But other than that, I think AD will be just fine. Same with LeBron. I could see it going 7 games, but at the same time, if it does go 7 games, I think the Lakers take that pretty easily with LeBron and AD on the court because those are the 2 best players in the series by a wide margin. And those are arguably 2 of the top 3 best players in the entire NBA. So I'm going to go with Lakers in 6 games. I think there is a chance to go 7 games if the Suns could properly expose all the flaws. But I'm going to go Lakers in 6.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Lakers in 6 as well, or Lakers in 5, either or. I think that Devin Booker really translates well to the playoffs. He's a bigger guard. He could score at all 3 levels. He's extremely efficient. He's a good playmaker. You guys know what Devin Booker provides on the court. And then you know what Chris Paul does in the playoffs as well. Even though he's had his struggles in the past, he has pretty good resiliency. So I think the Phoenix Suns can get a game or 2 in the series. But like you guys said before, the Phoenix Suns really have no answer for Anthony Davis at all. And if Frank Vogel adjusts, like I suggested him to in the beginning of the show, and takes Andre Drummond out of the game and spaces out the floor with Marcus Gasol, opens up opportunities for AD, I really think the series would probably end in 5. I mean, out of respect for Chris Paul and Devin Booker, they're great, and they're probably going to get a game because of how great they are. They're prone to go off one game. But given the circumstances, barring any significant injuries, obviously, I'll pick the Lakers to win the series. They have the 2 best players in the series. They have great depth when they're clicking. I would go with the Lakers simply because the Phoenix Suns have no one to match up with LeBron and AD. But we're going to keep it rolling with the 3-6 matchup. And that is, I believe, the Denver Nuggets versus the Portland Trailblazers. And this is an interesting matchup just because of Jamal Murray's injury. That opens up so much opportunity for the series to go either way. So I'm going to start off with Christian on this one. Who do you have winning the series and why?
Yeah, so I think, this is a matchup we've seen over the last couple of seasons. I mean, I remember the one a couple of years back when Portland got to the Western Conference Finals. And, I mean, they had a game where I think went to triple overtime. Rodney Hood finished it off. I mean, this is great for basketball once again. It's going to be a cool one. Obviously, Jamal Murray's injury, makes it less entertaining, but certainly more interesting because, it's going to become more important for Michael Porter Jr. to really cement himself as that second guy behind Nikola Jokic. And I expect him to do it. I think, the Trailblazers don't have a really good defensive structure. They don't really have much that could really, go at him and stop him. So honestly, I see, Michael Porter having a really big series. And I think that's what's going to put them over the top. I think, it'll probably go 7 games. Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, I mean, they're probably going to have a really great series as well. But I think the difference is Michael Porter really has shown, and that's why he's in the most improved finalists as the top 3 with Jeremy Grant and Julius Randle. He's going to have a really big series. I think he'll score average over 20 points a game, really efficient scoring. He's going to do a lot for that team. And obviously we've spoken so much about Nikola Jokic this season. He's an MVP candidate for a reason. He's probably going to win the award, barring, Steph Curry probably getting it. And I think he's going to have a big series once again. I don't see Yusuf Nurkic or Enes Kanter really doing too much to stop him. He's going to do everything for that team. And I think Michael Porter Jr.'s resurgence this season as that second guy ever since Jamal Murray got hurt is really going to propel them. So I got them in 7. It'll be fun to watch, but I think the Nuggets will edge it in the end.
Yeah, I'm going Denver in 6 games for the series. Jokic, when you look at him, he's one of the few guys in NBA history who could make their teammates better at such a high rate. I mean, he's one of the best players in NBA history at making their teammates better. And with Jamal Murray out, obviously that's a huge blow because with Jamal Murray, they're arguably in the finals this year. If not Western Conference Finals, or a really, really hard second round loss. But Jokic is just going to make guys better. I mean, that's what he does. And he's also going to be scoring 30 points per game, most likely, on Nurkic or Kanter in the process of making everyone around him better. I think Michael Porter Jr. will have a pretty big series. I think he'll have at least one off game, but I think he's going to have a great series. He's not going to fill Bubble Jamal's shoes, but he's going to have a big series, in my opinion. Jokic is going to have a monster series. I think he's going to just completely obliterate this Portland defense. And I think the Blazers get 2 games because down the stretch, although the Nuggets do have Jokic and Michael Porter Jr. to close out games, the Blazers do have 2 of the best shot creators in all of basketball, Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. I think there will be games where down the stretch they just completely go off. And I think the 2 games that Denver loses, I think they will be very close games, and I think there will be a few lopsided victories for Denver. But for the most part, I think this is going to be a 4-2 win for Denver. And for a few of their wins, I think it'll be by a significant margin. And the 2 losses, I think it'll be a very close game just because of Dame and CJ closing down the stretch. So I'm going to go with Denver in 6 games.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Denver in 6 games as well. I mean, I trust Nikola Jokic and Michael Porter Jr. to show up when it counts. I mean, the Portland Trailblazers are clicking just at the right time, but they also have a historically bad defense. And I think Jokic, being the offensive mastermind that he is really going to exploit those holes. He might put Enes Kanter in a body bag. It's going to be that bad. So, I mean, I expect Jokic to have one of the best series of his life. And then Michael Porter Jr., the Denver Nuggets are the Portland Trailblazers are just going to put Robert Covington on him and hope for the best. But the Denver Nuggets have so many options, and they're not as bad as the Portland Trailblazers defensively. I would give them the edge in this series as well. But it's pretty close when you consider the fact that Jamal Murray isn't playing. But I would still give Denver Nuggets the edge just because they've been so resilient without Jamal Murray in the lineup that I have pretty good confidence that they're going to end up winning this series. And then the final matchup, the 4-5, the Clippers versus the Mavericks. You guys see an upset? You guys see the Mavs actually get it done this time with Porzingis most likely being healthy? Who knows with him? It's always a mystery. But with Porzingis slated to be healthy, and with the Clippers improving their roster, what do you guys take away from the series? How many games do you see going? Who's winning? Justin, I'll start with you.
I think the Clippers will win the series. I've been going back and forth since the matchup was finalized. I've been going back and forth whether it's going to be 6 or 7 games. And it could go 5 games in the Clippers' favor as well because the Mavericks, they are worse than last year by a tiny bit because Porzingis has gotten worse. And they did lose Seth Curry for Josh Richardson, which is a pretty big downgrade for the system. And overall, it's just a downgrade. So they are worse, but I still think they're going to put up a huge fight. And I think it will go 7 games. I just think Luka Doncic this series, I mean, last year, even though Kawhi Leonard, he's not the defender he was in San Antonio, but he's still a great defender. Same with Paul George. Luka Doncic is going to be able to tear this defense apart, in my opinion. And I just think with his offensive impact, I think Rick Carlisle knows that Luka has to play like the majority of the game, just little stints here and there where he sits. And Luka's gravity, he's one of the best playmakers in league history, honestly. And his scoring ability is so underrated, in my opinion. People just think because he doesn't have a deep bag, he's not one of the best scorers in the league. But he is one of the best scorers in the league and one of the best shot creators in the league. And then his shooting has gotten so much better over the past 3 months. So I think Luka is just going to really, honestly, put this Dallas team on his back, and he's going to elevate everyone around him. As I said with Denver versus Portland, I think Luka's just going to make everyone better around him, which is why they're the 5th seed, because he just makes everyone better, which is why I think they'll take it to 7. But with the Clippers, I just think Paul George, I think he's pretty hungry, extremely hungry to come out this postseason and just be a different playoff P. Be playoff P, but positively, because last year and in years prior, he was just objectively bad in the playoffs. And I think he's ready to turn that around. And we know what Kawhi Leonard could do in the playoffs. Although he did have 1-2 bad games last year, he's still one of the best playoff performers in all of basketball. So I think that's going to really be the deciding factor. If it goes 7, I could see Luka just going all out and winning the series. But I think with him playing so much throughout the whole series, I just think it's going to be so much on him to the point where he can't do that on his own. And then the Clippers, they have Kawhi and PG. So I'm going to give it to the Clippers in 7. I think Luka has a dominant series, which is the only reason it'll go to 7. But I could see it going anywhere from 5 to 7 games.
Yeah. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. All right. I completely agree with Justin. I think, honestly, nobody's really talking about the Clippers. And I think, the lack of pressure at least off, what we see through the media, it seems like more people are talking about the Jazz, the Suns, even the Lakers, and the fact that they're the 7th seed. It seems like they're almost going a little under the radar, which I think suits them a little bit better than it does last season, because a lot of people were talking about, can this team actually, get to the finals, represent the West last season? And obviously they, choked against the Nuggets in the second round. And I think, this will be an interesting series once again. We saw it last season, even without Porzingis, who I think missed, the second half of the series, especially. Luka, put the team on his back, won a game where they shouldn't have won, and sent it to 6 games. I think, once again, it will go to 7, just because Porzingis' availability. That's going to be the biggest question, though. Can he stay healthy across a full game or a full series? I'm not too sure. That's the biggest question with me. But yeah, I think, that team, in terms, like you mentioned, Seth Curry versus Josh Richardson, I think that's certainly a drop off. I do like, some of the shooters they have in terms of JJ Redick. They got Melly in that trade as well. Tim Hardaway can be very streaky as well. But I think, having a guy like Rajon Rondo and his leadership for the Clippers is big. I think Kawhi Leonard and Paul George will perform in this specific series. And I think, Tyronn Lue versus Doc Rivers, that's an interesting dynamic. I think Ty Lue will, make better adjustments than we saw from Doc Rivers last season. And I think, that will be an important factor. But having guys like Serge Ibaka, I think, that veteran leadership and that veteran presence, in the first unit and even in the second unit will be really important. I think, in a 7-game series, I think they'll get it done, but certainly could see, an upset here. But I think, overall, as of right now, I think the Clippers will get it done in 7.
I think the Clippers are going to win this in 5. I think they're really going to win this in 5. I think the Mavs have regressed too much since last year. And just like Justin alluded to, I think the Clippers have improved tremendously. The Ibaka acquisition isn't as great as people expected. His rim protection has really fallen off since the past. But their shooting has improved. They're one of the best, if not the best, offensive team in the NBA statistically this year. Obviously, we all believe that's net visually because when they've played together, they've been the best. But the Clippers have a high-powered offense. They also have a top 10 defense. And I think when you combine all those factors, even if Paul George played bad, Paul George was horrendous in last year's playoffs against a better Mavericks team, and the Clippers still found a way to win. I think, given all those factors, I expect the team to perform better. I expect Paul George to only go up from here. I think that, given all those factors, I would pick the Clippers in an easy 5-game series. I think they get past this and then play the Utah Jazz in round 2, most likely, and that's where the real problems are going to begin, as they have a tough matchup if they play the Utah Jazz. But do you guys have anything else to add to the show tonight? So with that being said, guys, thank you for tuning in. This was a great episode. We hope you guys enjoy the Warriors versus Grizzlies playing game in about 7 minutes. I mean, it's going to be a great game. Hopefully the Warriors can win for the entertainment standpoint. But with that being said, guys, thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you guys next week. Peace.
Is this the dagger?